And if I didn't have sex with you, would I be able to stay for free? Or is that part of the deal?
Sex in exchange for free or discounted rent. Predatory landlords across the UK are asking for rent to be paid with sex, with an estimated 250,000 victims.
Have you done something like that before?
No, I haven't.
Illegal under the Sexual Offences Act and technically punishable by up to 7 years in prison.
Easygoing, laid-back landlord looking for a friendly, open-minded, attractive female, 24 to 40 years old, can be negotiable on rent.
But despite the growing number of landlords offering these arrangements, only one person has ever been charged with the crime. With the cost of living crisis pushing more people into financial insecurity, questions are being raised over how effective the current laws are in protecting society's most vulnerable.
He told me there'll be threesomes, engaging in threesomes, and he would want to even see me perform right there and then.
The Home Secretary, Suella Braverman, has announced that she's launched a 10-week call for evidence, known as a probe, amid allegations of a growing problem.
I'm looking for a fuck buddy to have fun with. I am active and like to have sex a few times a night.
They're asking whether a specific offence needs to be created. From those who want one,
really key, really important is that the government bring in a dedicated and specific law to target sex for rent.
And those who don't.
If women choose to enter those kinds of relationships, that's up to them, and we do not want the police or state interfering in people's private lives.
What we're seeing with this sex for rent crisis is another crisis that has resulted from multiple undealt with crises.
Finally, the voices of the prolific sex for rent market are being heard. Is it time for a change in the law?
Look at my room, guys. Look at my room. Look at the damage. Look at the damage, guys.
Hi, Joel. Yep.
Joel left Nigeria in 2019 after being persecuted for being the face of Nigeria's first month-long LGBTQ+ pride protest.
Hi, it's Joel. Welcome to Abuja, Nigeria. We're all about pride and our struggle for freedom.
He came to the UK to seek asylum. Since being here, Joel has moved from detention centres to temporary accommodations to private rentals, but couldn't stay because of homophobic attacks and sexual assault.
My room is gone. Look at my room. Look at my room, guys.
Then I'm gonna melt your fucking head. Do you hear what I'm saying? You fucking joke. You fucking.
Vulnerable and in a desperate position to find safe housing, he was propositioned with sex for rent arrangements multiple times.
Experiencing homophobia from non-stop, from the point in the detention center into all the accommodations, every single one of them. That pushed me into more levels of desperation. So I did put out my story out there, and then I was bombarded with different oh yeah, what's your sexual position? And then other people wouldn't say, but they would say, oh, we do have a room. And then when you go, it kind of it segues into, it's going to be transactional sex. He told me there'll be threesomes, engaging in threesomes, and he would want to even see me perform right there and then, so he would see how good I was at whatever. After that, I started once again back to spare room and Zoopla and all of this, and I started looking for properties, certain kind of properties where there'll be people there already, and you could tell them I have this amount to pay. So that's where I started meeting people of a certain age, and they would tell me, oh well, the rent is X amount, but if you cannot pay, you can pay what you have, but you have to engage in sexual activities. So at some point, I started considering that, because I didn't want to be out there.
How does that make you feel as a person?
It reduces me and shows even further how powerless, to a point, I am in Britain as I know it.
Been tucked in the cut, growing. Not a lot to show for it, unless you can see through me. I learned to see beyond all the love.
Sex for rent is an area that's largely hidden. There's not much reliable data, and it's hard to find people to talk about it because of shame, fear, and stigma. But it's also because it's not like a lot of landlords are leaving paper trails. It's not written in the contract. So that means that a lot of predatory behaviour is happening after people have moved in. Like this one student who reached out to me about her experience. She asked me not to reveal her identity as she still lives there now. She told me things that her landlord had said to her whilst living there. He told me my underwear made my ass look nice. He said he'd come sleep with me that night. He asked about my nipples and whether it hurts when I get excited. I hate it because he knows he has the upper hand because I have nowhere else to go. That bit really struck me because these landlords are just playing into the fact that they know that their tenants have nowhere else to go. Such a trap. It's just heartbreaking, really.
We talk about sex for rent, but we don't really talk about the reasons that are driving that. So young people experience homelessness or vulnerability because they don't have a safety net, but we don't really talk about what that means to be a young person without friends, without family, without people that they can really rely upon. And if you don't have those people to rely upon, who are you going to say that you're struggling to? Who are you going to say, this is what I have to do? Where do you go? What's the conversation that you need to have? On the one hand, we need to make it a lot harder for predators to be predators in the first place. So yes, absolutely, regulation is needed, laws are needed. On the other hand, we also need to stop young people from being so desperate in the first place. Why do we live in a society where young people feel so desperate? We can't live in a country where there's 1 in 50 young people that need to go to their council because they're homeless. We need to improve the services for young people so that they're not so desperate that they're choosing between paying the rent, eating that night, and actually thinking about sex for rent.
The system have failed me constantly, so it's up to me, like the onus obviously was, I felt it was up to me to kind of like compensate and, just so you're not homeless.
Joel is just one example of the 250,000 people that have been asked to exchange sex for rent over a 5-year period. Research done by Generation Rent revealed that 1 in 10 people who responded to the survey with a household income below £20,000 said that they'd been propositioned. This means those on lower incomes are those more likely to be targeted by rogue landlords. But who are the perpetrators exploiting vulnerable people?
When sexual exploitation occurs on the streets of this country, the police act. Yet Craigslist is facilitating and profiting from sexual exploitation through sex for rent, and yet nothing is happening whatsoever.
That's a clip from 2018, but despite flagging it back then, Craigslist still seems to be the platform of choice for sex for rent ads. I wanted to see the scale of it myself, and how easy it is still to find landlords offering these types of arrangements. So I went on Craigslist and, using a fake name, I reached out to some room ads. Quickly, responses started coming back.
A couple of body shots would do nicely. I'm a tit and arse man, lol. I'm sure I can arrange a room for you if you're open-minded enough for me. And the ad listing is actually to share the bed with him, a 45-year-old divorced man. So this was within 6 emails. So I said, hi, is your listing available? He says, when do you need to move? I said, in like 2 weeks, can you give me some details about you and the place? And he said, sure. And then asked, can I see your picture? I said, okay, can you send some pictures of the room? Is it £44 per week? And I attached the photos that we've been authorised to use. And he responds, so this is the 6th email correspondence with nothing, nothing sexual up until this point. He goes, you look good. I'm looking for a fuck buddy to have fun with. I'm active and like to have sex a few times a night.
I arranged a call with the landlord.
Hiya.
Hi. What do you want to know?
I just wanted you to tell me a little bit more about the listing, because obviously from email you don't really get that much information.
I believe if we catch up for a drink and if we get along, this will be easier whenever you have time.
And you said on email that you want us to be fuck buddies. Have you done something like that before?
No, I haven't, and I just came out of a relationship and I don't want to do anything.
Okay. And if I had sex with you, because you said, how much is the price of the room? £44 a week.
I'm saying I don't need money. I'm well off. You can stay for free.
I can stay for free. And if I didn't have sex with you, would I be able to stay for free? Or is that part of the deal?
No, just we need to finish to meet up first. Speak if we get along or not.
Okay, it depends if we get along or not.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay.
It took me 30 minutes to find, set up, and confirm an arrangement. But despite increasing awareness of the issue, one morning on Craigslist shows just how many landlords are still putting up listings and how easy they are to find. So how has only one person ever been charged with the crime? 53-year-old Christopher Cox was convicted in the first sex for rent prosecution in 2022. The court heard that he targeted young, vulnerable women via Craigslist who needed somewhere to stay, including one woman who was homeless, unwell, and desperate. His actions were filmed by undercover reporters who passed the footage over to the police. The government is asking if the current measures are working. So what does the law actually say? Sex for rent is a crime, but there is no specific offence for it. There are some parts of the Sexual Offences Act that can be used to address sex for rent, but the offences weren't originally designed for it. These crimes can see up to 7 years in prison. I've come to Birmingham to meet Tilly from Generation Rent, a campaign group for private renters.
Hi, lovely to meet you. How are you?
There aren't enough people who are being found out for being these predators. The way that it's written in law is that it's section 52 and 53 of the Sexual Offences Act, which is to cause or incite prostitution for gain. So people have to be understood legally as a sex worker, which obviously many people don't necessarily consider themselves to be if they are victims of sex for rent. If you look at the law as it's written, most people would just never think this law is something that will affect them, that they can use.
Generation Rent's research looked into the extent of predatory landlords. They found 4% of people they surveyed said they'd been offered discounted rent in exchange for sexual acts, and 3% said that they'd been offered free rent for sexual acts. This translates to around 250,000 sex for rent victims. Some victims said that they'd reported predatory behaviour or assault to the police, but had not received the support they needed.
We want a new law. I think that will help, but it won't make everything better. It certainly won't completely end sex for rent. It is a sexual offence, and sexual offences, generally speaking, are extremely difficult to prosecute.
What are the barriers in reporting this?
It's very difficult to get people to come forward and tell their experiences, even anonymously, for obvious reasons and for reasons I completely understand. There's no guarantee that people who come out and say that I've been assaulted in this way are going to be treated with the compassion that they deserve by everyone. And there just seems to be, I think, this belief that it's fair game for people who are sort of acting as landlords and letting agents to strike these offers as if there's some sort of equal balance, when often we're dealing with people who are on insecure incomes, who are on lower incomes, who are choosing between homelessness and living somewhere.
Something so widespread and rampant and right under our noses, and most times even in our face. You don't need to squint, it's just there. But no, nothing's been done, especially for vulnerable people and people living in austerity and all of that. And then people like myself who are so desperate, would almost agree to anything, and they're aware of this.
Sex for rent isn't just about sex for rent. Sex for rent is part of a much wider social system that we found ourselves in, whereby we've got a housing crisis, we've got a cost of living crisis, we've got people who are just experiencing so many traumas one after another, and because of that they find themselves in a position whereby they feel that the only way that they can live, survive, have a home is to have sex for rent. So we're not going to move on from this place that we're in society until we actually deal with the multiple crises that are glaringly obvious, such as the housing crisis, which has been with us for decades. We need more social homes. We need them to be built purposely for the people that need to have those social homes, but we also need that within the private rented sector, people actually accept people who are coming with universal credit. But one of the many things that need to happen is an attitude change to people who are just trying to move on with their lives, and we need people to say, okay, we'll help you.
While some people think that the law would work, one group thinks that it punishes those who consensually enter into arrangements. The English Collective of Prostitutes are campaigning against outlawing sex for rent.
We're opposing a sex for rent law because it won't address the housing crisis that exists, and if it interferes in people's private lives, if a woman wants to enter a kind of relationship like that, she should be able to, and if the landlord is abusive or threatening, then he should be prosecuted under the existing criminal law. For us, the issue is really centred on consent. If women choose to enter those kinds of relationships, that's up to them, and we do not want the police or state interfering in people's private lives. This sex for rent law is actually going to strip women of one of the options that we have found to survive and to get decent housing, or to get housing at all, decent or not. It's not going to address the housing crisis that people are facing, because that housing crisis is founded somewhere else. It needs rent controls, it needs more tenant rights, it needs more social, really genuinely affordable housing. Those are the things that need to be addressed if you want to deal with abusive landlords. It treats us like we're victims that don't know the nature of our own relationships, and that's just not true. Women are not like that. We know the difference between abuse and consenting sex or a consenting relationship.
I reached out to the Home Office to ask them about whether they think a change in the law will be enough to stamp out predatory landlords. After a couple of conversations, they decided that they didn't want to speak to me, but they did send me this statement saying that they hope the call for evidence will
bring us closer to ending this deeply harmful trend and better protect victims, and is another example of how this government will not stop in our efforts to bring more sexual and domestic abuses to justice.
The solution for sex for rent isn't clear. Some people think that the answer lies in creating a new law, but other people think the issue lies more around consent. But what I've learned is that sex for rent isn't the sickness, it's a symptom of the housing crisis. And until that crisis is resolved, people may continue to be exploited.